Bear with me, it's allergy season. I'm a little bit under the weather, but listen carefully and follow me. You got Miguel Cotto, who's the WBC champion. You got Gennady Golovkin, who's the rightful mandatory to Miguel Cotto, the WBC Interim Champion. You got Tureano Johnson, who's the WBC Silver Champion, so he's supposed to get a shot after Gennady Golovkin. And then you got right below him a fighter by the name of Jorge Sebastián Heiland, who is 25-4-2 with 13 KOs. Who is he fought of note? Well, remember when he knocked out Matthew Macklin? You should know Matthew Macklin because he fought Sergio Martinez. He knocked out Matthew Macklin something mean in the I believe it was the 10th round. I covered that fight. He's a relatively small fighter as far as he's the type of guy that'll weigh in at like 157, something like that. So if they were to make it at a catch weight of about 158 or something like that, it could work, you know, because he's not a big guy. The most he's ever weighed in as about, I believe it's like something like 162. But majority of his career, the good portion of his career, he's a guy who weighs in at about 157 3/4, usually no more than that. I'm talking about on average. So he's a small guy, and even if you make the fight at a full 160 pounds, still he's not a guy who's going to come into the ring 180 pounds. You know, I would say something like maybe 168, 171 at most, something like that. And Cotto, I would say, is going to come into the ring at about 165, 168, around there. Who is he as a fighter? 4 defeats. I believe he's got 1 majority decision in his last defeat, which was in 2013, and he didn't avenge it. As far as credible opponents, not anyone that you would really, you know, take note to. He's an Argentine fighter. But before I go on, let me read a little bit of what I got, and what I'll do is I'll share this information on my Facebook. So this is in an email right now that I got earlier today. Compliments of Javier Guzman. You know, a lot of sources, you know, as they're called, don't like their names to be said, so you kind of dance around to whereas and he said, listen, you know, you can say my name. So shout out Javier Guzman. Shout out to Mad1 ALC. And where do I start? Okay, so I'll start right here. Now this is interesting. Until January of 2015, now this is in Google Translator, so it's going to be a little off. You know how they mess up words sometimes and put them in the wrong place. Until January of 2015, David Lemieux was listed as the challenger number 2 WBC middleweight rankings. Suddenly, or rather, since David Lemieux signed a few weeks ago with Golden Boy Promotions and Oscar De La Hoya's company, as by magic, the Canadian disappeared from the WBC rankings and now appears as not available. Weird, right? Now, if you don't know, I'm just going to, you know, intervene a little bit. David Lemieux was taking on Hassan N'Dam for the IBF title. In those days, Lemieux was mentioned as a possible rival to Gennady Golovkin interim championship title and also regular champion Miguel Cotto. So at one point in time, and I remember I talked about it quite a while ago, David Lemieux was ranked very high by the WBC as far as he would have been right. He was right up there with Sergio Martinez, Miguel Cotto, and you know, Gennady Golovkin before Gennady Golovkin beat Marco Antonio Rubio. Instead, the Bahamian Tureano Johnson now appears to be ranked at number 1, which is true. He won the WBC Silver on that first Rock Nation card. Now, since, you know, and I'm translating, like basically, it's a little confusing, so I'm translating it. Now you have Tureano Johnson, who's the WBC Silver champion, and then you have Jorge Heiland, who's the guy who's supposed to be taking on Tureano Johnson, but instead, it's looking likely that Cotto is going to pick Heiland. So I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain the logic. I'm going to explain. You'll be able to see this. You know, you got to go to my Facebook. You'll be able to see this for yourself in full. Where did I go? Where did I go? On the other hand, as indicated by the current world champion of the division, Puerto Rican fighter Miguel Cotto, WBC president Mauricio Suleiman. No agency handles my career. So basically what that was is the WBC told Miguel Cotto, okay, you get 1 defense of your title in or 1 voluntary fight in June or whenever you want it, then your next fight has to be Golovkin or you're going to drop your title. Now, me and fans, we know that Cotto can't do something like that in his career, and Cotto has to fight Golovkin. You know, if he doesn't fight Canelo, he has to fight Golovkin and vice versa. So he can't just see it off in his career and not fight these 2 guys. If you don't know, he signed the deal, him and his promotional company, or working with Rock Nation Sports, $50 million plus. I believe it was said to be around $55 million. Miguel Cotto and his promotions are also going to be putting on concerts down in Puerto Rico. Now, what happened was Top Rank, turn the heat off. Top Rank is pissed because Cotto basically, when the Canelo negotiations and everything was going on, it was Canelo's side and Oscar De La Hoya's side that was doing all the talking as far as the media is concerned. But Miguel Cotto was quiet, and we find out that during that time, Miguel Cotto wasn't returning Top Rank's phone calls, responding to emails. So basically, Top Rank was trying to act like everything was cool. You know, like their relationship was still cool with Miguel Cotto, but it was not. Now, from my understanding and from information I've got, is that Miguel Cotto did want Floyd Mayweather in a rematch. But whether it's true or not, we don't know. And that's maybe one of the reasons for the fallout. But we're going to talk about this some more. But would they put Miguel Cotto over Manny Pacquiao? You know, and it's just certain things like that. Will he still be training with Freddie Roach? Yes, he's still going to be training with Freddie Roach, even though he doesn't have a relationship with Top Rank anymore. People have been saying, well, Timothy Bradley, Brandon Rios. No, Miguel Cotto and Top Rank have real major problems right now. Rock Nation and Top Rank, no. But as far as, I don't see Miguel Cotto working with those guys. I don't see it. And then when people talk about Amir Khan, it's like, well, Rock Nation and Al Heyman don't have a working relationship. So until I see them, you know, start having a working relationship, I'm not going to talk about fighters that me covering boxing so much, I know it's a slim chance to happen because of politics. So, getting back to the letter. Let me see, what's the next part I'm going to win? In another scenario, David Lemieux, by signing with Golden Boy Promotion, unleashed the discontent of former promoter Jan Michael, Michael, who filed the lawsuit. That makes us think that the Canadian could be, you know, blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry, I'm not saying blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to get to something important. Oh, yeah, this is the part I was looking for. This is the last part of the article I'm going to read, and then I'll let you read it for yourself. In turn, Gabby Pena Guricano, I believe. Basically, Miguel Cotto's manager manages Cotto and Heiland. And he would be open to having Canelo and Heiland fight on June the 6th. Now, remember what I'm saying. Heiland is due a title shot anytime in the next year or year and a half with the way the WBC is working anyway. So when you read this article, you know, it's going to be in Spanish, and then I have the English translation right here. When you read this article, you're going to see where I'm coming from when I'm saying, oh yeah, this makes sense, and it's looking like this is who it's going to be. You know, and remember, and the reason why I'm saying guys like Heiland and not Trout, Amir Khan, Timothy Bradley, Brandon Rios, you got to understand how the politics are working in boxing right now. You know, so you don't waste your time. You know, you got to find out, you know, who he's got. Like, for example, I thought it may be Anthony Mundine, maybe. But when you look at who Cotto can fight and the fact that it's not Golovkin, like right now, I got to do another video on Golovkin fighting Willie Monroe. And actually tell people why it's a good fight to take for a fighter who's fighting 4 times a year, you know? So, you know, if you have 2 big fights and then 2, you know, like a fight in between to tune up for the big fight, but yet the person is still ranked, you know, and a good fighter, you know, it shouldn't be a problem with that if you're an active champion. Like I said, Golovkin was only fighting twice a year, but that's just my own personal thoughts. As this story develops, I will give you more, but from the people I've talked to, and a few people down in Puerto Rico, it's looking like Cotto versus Heiland in MSG will likely happen, and the selling point will be that he's ranked #1 by the WBC. You know, so even though Tureano Johnson is the #1 contender, he and Golovkin is the interim. Still on paper, Heiland is ranked #1 by the WBC because Tureano Johnson has that WBC silver, so it makes him a contender. You know, it's weird how the belts work, but basically he's a #1 guy, and you would hear, you know, ranked #1 by the WBC. You know, so that's the selling point of the fight right there. Like I said, I'm going to share this on my Facebook page. If you don't know how to get to my Facebook page, all my social media information is right down below. This will also be on realcombatmedia.com. I'm C Street Controversy. This is C Street Controversy Live. Shout out to Mad One LLC, Hoop Jab, GTM Sports Banners, Be Real TV, T Street Controversy Live.